This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. China and the Chinese by Herbert Allen Giles. Lecture 6. Some Chinese Manners and Customs. A foreigner arriving for the first time in China will be especially struck by 3 points to which he is not accustomed at home. The people will consist almost entirely of men. They will all wear their hair plaited in queues, and they will all be exactly alike. The seclusion of women causes the traveller least surprise of the 3, being a custom much more rigorously enforced in other Oriental countries, and directly he gets accustomed to the uniform absence of beard and moustache, he soon finds out that the Chinese people are not one whit more alike facially than his own countrymen of the West. A Chinaman cannot wear a beard before he is 40, unless he happens to have a married son. He also shaves the whole head, with the exception of a round patch at the back, from which the much prized queue is grown. There are some strange misconceptions as to the origin and meaning of the queue, more perhaps on the other side of the Atlantic, where we are not so accustomed to Chinamen as you are in America. Some associate the queue with religion, and gravely state that without it no Chinaman can be hauled into paradise. Others know that queues have only been worn by the Chinese for about 250 years, and that they were first imposed as a badge of conquest by the Manchu Tartars, the present rulers of China. Previous to 1644, the Chinese clothed their bodies and dressed their hair in the style of the modern Japanese. Of course, I mean those Japanese who still wear what is wrongly known as the beautiful native dress of Japan. Wrongly, because as a matter of fact the Japanese borrowed their dress, as well as their literature, philosophy and early lessons in art, from China. The Japanese dress is the dress of the Ming period in China, 1368 to 1644. It remains to be seen whence and wherefore the Manchu Tartars obtained this strange fashion of the queue. The Tartars may be said to have depended, almost for their very existence, upon the horse, and in old pictures the Tartar is often seen lying curled up asleep with his horse, illustrating the mutual affection and dependence between master and beast. Out of sheer gratitude and respect for his noble ally, the man took upon himself the form of the animal, growing a queue in imitation of the horse's tail. Unsupported by any other evidence, this somewhat grotesque theory would fall to the ground, but there is other evidence of a rather striking character, which, taken in conjunction with what has been said, seems to me to settle the matter. Official coats, as seen in China at the present day, are made with very peculiar sleeves, shaped like a horse's leg, and ending in what is an unmistakable hoof, completely covering the hand. These are actually known to the Chinese as horseshoe sleeves, and encased therein, a Chinaman's arms certainly look very much like a horse's forelegs. The tail completes the picture. When the Tartars conquered China 250 years ago, there was at first a strenuous fight against the queue, and it has been said that the turbans still worn by the southern Chinese were originally adopted as a means of concealing the hateful Manchu badge. Nowadays, every Chinaman looks upon his queue as an integral and honourable part of himself. If he cannot grow one, he must have recourse to art, for he could not appear tailless, either in this world or the next. False queues are to be seen hanging in the streets for sale. They are usually worn by burglars, and come off in your hand when you think you've caught your man. Prisoners are often led to and from jail by their queues, sometimes 3 or 4 being tied together in a gang. false hair is not confined entirely to the masculine queue. Chinese ladies often use it as a kind of chignon, and it is an historical fact that a famous empress, who set aside the emperor and ruled China with an Elizabethan hand from AD 684 to 705, used to present herself in the council chamber before her astonished ministers, fortified with an artificial beard. Dyeing the hair, too, has been practiced in China, certainly from the Christian era, if not earlier, chiefly by men whose hair and beards begin to grow grey too soon. One of the proudest titles of the Chinese, carrying them back as it does to prehistoric times, is that of the black-haired people, also a title, perhaps a mere coincidence, of the ancient Akkadians. In spite, however, of the universality of black hair in both men and women, there are exceptions to the rule, and I myself have seen a Chinese albino, with the usual light-coloured hair and pink eyes. The Reverend Dr. Arthur Smith, an American missionary, has long been known for his keen insight into the workings of the Chinese mind. In his last book, China in Convulsion, under the head of Protestant Missions, he makes the following important statement, important not only to those who intend to take part in missionary work, but also to the official, to the explorer, and to the merchant. It would be unfair, he says, not to point out that when a large body of Occidentals, imperfectly acquainted with the Chinese language, etiquette, modes of thought, and intellectual presuppositions, begins on a large and universal scale the preaching of an uncompromising system of morals and doctrines like Christianity, there must be much which, unconsciously to themselves, rouses Chinese prejudices. The following maxim comes from Confucius. If you visit a foreign state, ask what the prohibitions are. If you go into a strange neighbourhood, inquire what the manners and customs are. Certainly it is altogether desirable that a foreigner going to China, whether in an official capacity or as a merchant, missionary or traveller, should have some acquaintance with the ordinary rules and ceremonial of Chinese social life. Such knowledge will often go far to smooth away Chinese prejudices against the barbarian, and on occasions might conceivably aid in averting a catastrophe. It is true that Lao Tzu said, "Ceremonies are but the veneer of loyalty and good faith." His words, however, have not prevailed against the teaching of Confucius, who was an ardent believer in the value of ceremonial. One of the latter's disciples wished, as a humanitarian, to abolish the sacrifice of a sheep upon the first day of every month. But Confucius rebuked him, saying, "My son, you love the sheep. I love the ceremony." When, during his last visit to England, Li Hongzhang made remarks about Mr. Chamberlain's eyeglass, he was considered by many to be wanting in common politeness. But from the Chinese point of view, it was Mr. Chamberlain who was offending, quite unwittingly of course, against an important canon of good taste. It is a distinct breach of Chinese etiquette to wear spectacles while speaking to an equal. The Chinese invariably remove their glasses when conversing. For what reason I have never been able to discover. One thing is quite certain, they do not like being looked at through a medium of glass or crystal, and it costs the foreigner nothing to fall in with their harmless prejudice. Chinese street etiquette is also quite different from our own, a fact usually ignored by blustering foreigners, who march through a Chinese town as if the place belonged to them, and not infrequently complain that coolies and others will not get out of their way. Now there is a graduated scale of Chinese street rights in this particular respect, to which, as being recognized by the Chinese themselves, it would be advisable for foreigners to pay some attention. In England it has been successfully maintained that the roadway belongs to all equally, foot passengers, equestrians and carriage passengers alike. Not so in China. The ordinary foot passenger is bound to get out of the way of the lowest coolie who is carrying a load. The same coolie must make way, even at great inconvenience to himself, for a sedan chair. An empty chair yields the way to a chair with somebody inside. A chair, inasmuch as being more manageable, gets out of the way of a horse, and a horse, chair, coolie and foot passenger all clear the road for a wedding or other procession, or for the retinue of a mandarin. At the same time, a Chinaman may stop his cart or barrow, or dump down his load, just wherever he pleases, and other persons have to make the best of what is left of the road. I have even seen a theatrical stage being built right across a street, completely blocking it, so that all traffic had to be diverted from its regular course. There are no municipal regulations, and no police in China, so that the people have to arrange things among themselves, and, considering the difficulties inherent in such an absence of government, it may fairly be said that they succeed remarkably well. When two friends meet in the street, either may put up his fan and screen his face, whereupon the other will pass by without a sign of recognition. The meaning is simply, too busy to stop for a chat, and the custom, open and above board as it is, compares favourably perhaps with the not at home of Western civilization. I do not know of any Chinese humorist who ever, as in the old story, shouted out to a visitor, "I'm not at home." Confucius himself certainly came very near to doing so. It is on record that when an unwelcome visitor came to call, the sage sent out to say that he was too ill to receive guests, at the same time seizing his harpsichord and singing to it from an open window, in order to expose the hollowness of his own plea. Anyone on horseback, or riding in a sedan chair, who happens to meet a friend walking, must dismount before venturing to salute him. However, to obviate the constant inconvenience of so doing, the foot passenger is in duty bound to screen his face as above, and thus, by a fiction which deceives nobody, much unnecessary trouble is saved. When two mandarins of equal rank find themselves face to face in their sedan chairs, those attendants among their retinues who carry the enormous wooden fans rush forward and insert these between the two passing chairs, so that their masters may be presumed not to see each other, and consequently not be obliged to get out.
Please subscribe the channel if you want to see other videos, push the bell button to get the notification for the new videos, and like it if you learned anything new.